They thought our love was real. It was all a lie. Welcome to Prime Tale. Here we tell original stories about love, sacrifice, and the quiet moments that change everything. If you enjoy emotional, slow-burn romance, fake relationships that turn real, and stories that stay with you long after the ending, make sure you subscribe to Prime Tale, like this video, and turn on notifications. Now take a deep breath and let the story begin. I was never meant to be visible. I worked in the athletic department, but I existed on the edges of it, carrying folders, fixing schedules, answering emails no one else wanted to answer. People nodded at me in passing, but they never stopped, never asked my name, never wondered who I was beyond the tasks I completed. And I liked it that way. Being unseen felt safe, because I had watched what fame did to people. It turned human beings into stories. It flattened them into headlines and opinions. It decided who they were without ever asking them. So I kept my head down. I wore neutral colors. I avoided places where cameras gathered. I told myself that as long as I stayed small, the world couldn't hurt me. Then Ethan Cross walked past my desk one afternoon, and the air shifted. I didn't look up right away. Everyone knew Ethan Cross, the star quarterback, the pride of the university, the boy whose name echoed through stadiums every weekend. But when I finally glanced up, I saw something no one ever talked about. He looked tired, not physically tired, soul tired. His smile was gone. His shoulders were tense, like he was bracing for impact that never stopped coming. That was a week before everything fell apart. The scandal didn't start loudly. It began with whispers. A short video clip, a caption filled with assumptions, a moment stripped of context and dressed up as truth. Ethan arguing with someone off camera, his voice raised, his expression sharp. The internet decided who he was in under 5 minutes. By nightfall, the comments were vicious, arrogant, entitled, dangerous. By morning, sponsors were calling. By afternoon, the university's legal team was involved. And by evening, Ethan Cross was no longer a hero. He was a risk. The athletic department buzzed with panic. Phones rang nonstop. Meetings stacked on top of meetings. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, Coach Reynolds called for me. My heart pounded as I walked to his office. I replayed every small mistake I'd ever made in my head. Every late email. Every missed detail. I knocked. Inside, the room felt heavy. Coach Reynolds sat behind his desk, jaw tight. And across from him sat Ethan. Up close, he looked worse. His eyes were hollow. His hands clenched together, like he didn't trust them to stay still. Coach told me to sit. Then he told me the truth. Ethan's image needed to be repaired. Not slowly. Not naturally. Immediately. The public needed a new story. A softer one. Then he said the words I never expected to hear directed at me. They needed a girlfriend. A fake one. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. I laughed, the sound sharp and out of place. But no one else did. Ethan lifted his head and looked straight at me. Not through me. At me. He said my name. He said I was perfect because I wasn't chasing him. Because I avoided attention. Because I didn't look at him like he was a prize to be won. I wanted to say no. Everything in me screamed no. But then Coach slid the contract across the desk. 3 months. Public appearances. Hand-holding. Smiles. Silence. And the payment. The number made my breath catch. It meant freedom. It meant sleeping without fear of overdue bills. It meant a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could pretend. I signed. Ethan stood and offered his hand. When our palms touched, something unexpected passed between us. Not excitement. Not attraction. Recognition. Like two people standing at the edge of something neither of them could see yet. I didn't know it then. But that handshake wasn't just an agreement. It was the moment my quiet life ended. Nothing prepares you for the moment your life stops being yours. That happened to me the first time I walked beside Ethan Cross in public. The air outside the building felt different, heavier, like the world was holding its breath. Before I even understood what was happening, cameras appeared from nowhere. Flashes exploded. Voices overlapped. My name, my real name, was shouted by strangers who had never met me. My instinct was to pull away. Ethan didn't let me. His hand closed around mine, firm and steady. Not possessive. Protective. He leaned in and whispered one word. Smile. So I did. That single smile cost me my anonymity. By the next morning, I no longer belonged only to myself. My face was everywhere. On blogs. On sports pages. On accounts that analyzed my body language like it was a science experiment. They speculated about my past. My intentions. My worth. They didn't know how my hands shook when I held my phone. Or how my chest tightened every time I refreshed the screen. They didn't know I hadn't slept. Ethan noticed. That night, after the noise finally died down, we sat in silence in his apartment. The place was large, expensive, and somehow empty. This isn't what I wanted for you, he said quietly. I laughed without humor. It's not what I wanted for me either. That was the first honest thing we shared. Behind closed doors, Ethan wasn't the confident star the world saw. He moved carefully, like someone afraid of breaking things. He spoke less. Listened more. He told me about the pressure. About being 16 when people started calling him a future legend. About never knowing who liked him and who liked what he represented. Fame, he said, was lonely. I understood loneliness in a different way. Our conversations stretched late into the night. We talked about dreams we'd buried. About mistakes we didn't talk about out loud. About how exhausting it was to perform every day. Somewhere along the way, pretending stopped feeling like work. It started feeling natural. Too natural. I noticed the small things. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he automatically reached for me in crowded rooms. The way his shoulders relaxed when I was near. Then came the jealousy. It surprised me with how sharp it felt. We were at a public event, one of many, when a woman laughed too loudly at his jokes and touched his arm like she belonged there. The cameras loved it. So did the internet. Something twisted in my chest. I reminded myself this was fake. But my heart didn't care about contracts. That night, tension hung between us like unfinished words. We stood too close in the quiet of his kitchen. Close enough to feel each other breathe. I wanted to say something. So did he. Instead, he stepped back. He said crossing that line would ruin everything. He was right. That didn't make it hurt less. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. I was falling for a man I wasn't supposed to love, and he was pretending not to fall for me. Game day always carried a certain electricity, but that night felt different. The stadium lights burned brighter. The crowd was louder. Every movement felt charged, like something important was about to happen whether we were ready or not. I sat where I was told to sit, smiled when I was told to smile, wore the colors they approved. But my hands were shaking. Not because of the cameras. Because of Ethan. I watched him from the sidelines as he warmed up, his focus sharp, his body moving on instinct. To the world, he looked confident again. Restored. Redeemed. But I knew better. Before he ran onto the field, he looked for me. When our eyes met, something passed between us, quiet, grounding, unspoken. And then he was gone. The game unfolded like a story written in pressure. Every throw carried expectation. Every hit drew a collective breath from the crowd. Ethan played like a man with something to lose. No, like a man with something to protect. When the final whistle blew and the scoreboard declared victory, the stadium erupted. Ethan didn't celebrate with his teammates. He ran straight toward me. Cameras followed him, of course. They always did. He stopped in front of me, breathless, eyes bright with adrenaline. Then he leaned down and kissed my forehead. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. It was instinct. And the world saw it. By the time we left the stadium, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Headlines shifted tone overnight. Comments softened. The narrative changed. They believed in him again. They believed in us. That belief came with a cost. Because when people start watching closely, they don't just see what you show them. They dig. A week later, my past came knocking. An ex-boyfriend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, sold a version of our history to the media. A cruel version. He painted me as ambitious, calculated, a woman who climbed toward power by attaching herself to men. The story spread faster than the truth ever could. Suddenly, I wasn't the quiet, grounding presence. I was a suspect. The comments turned vicious. Gold digger. User. Fake. I tried to stay strong. I told myself it was noise. But words have weight. One night, alone in the apartment, the silence finally broke me. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, phone dark beside me, and cried until my chest hurt. I didn't hear Ethan come in. I only felt him kneel beside me. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer solutions. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me while I fell apart. For the first time since this arrangement began, I didn't feel like a role. I felt like a person. I told him everything. About the fear, the shame, the regret of signing that contract. He listened. When I finished, he rested his forehead against mine. He said he was sorry. Not for the scandal. For bringing me into his storm. That was when the pretending finally ended. The kiss that followed wasn't careful. The first warning didn't come from Ethan. It came from his agent. He was the kind of man who wore expensive suits and spoke calmly even when delivering bad news. His smile never reached his eyes, and the way he looked at people made it clear he was always calculating something. To him, Ethan wasn't a person. He was a brand. And I was a risk. He didn't insult me directly. He didn't need to. He talked about optics. About timing. About how public perception mattered more than truth. Then he said something I would never forget. Feelings make athletes unpredictable. After that meeting, things began to change. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Ethan didn't stop calling. He just called less. He didn't stop smiling. He just smiled without looking at me. He didn't pull away completely. He stepped back slowly, like someone afraid of falling off a cliff. At first, I told myself it was stress. The draft was coming. Scouts were watching his every move. Analysts were dissecting his body language, his interviews, even his silence. Every mistake could cost him millions. I understood that. What I didn't understand was how lonely it felt to stand beside someone who was already halfway gone. The nights changed first. He used to talk to me late into the night. About football. About his childhood. About the pressure he felt to be perfect all the time. Now conversations ended early. He said he was tired. He said he needed rest. But even when we sat in the same room, the space between us felt heavy. Like something unsaid was pressing down on both of us. I started noticing how careful he became in public. Where he stood. How close he got. How long his hands stayed on mine before he let go. I wasn't his girlfriend anymore. I was an image problem waiting to happen. And one day, the truth finally hit me. I wasn't helping his life. I was complicating it. That realization hurt more than any headline ever could. One evening, after another quiet dinner filled with unfinished sentences, I finally said it. I told him I couldn't keep pretending nothing was wrong. I told him I didn't agree to be invisible. I reminded him that this started as a fake relationship, but I never agreed to fake my feelings. He didn't argue. That hurt the most. Instead, he looked exhausted. Like someone who had been carrying too much weight for too long. He told me I was the only place he felt normal. The only place where he didn't have to perform. The only place where he wasn't the star quarterback. But fear wrapped around every word he spoke. He was terrified. Terrified of losing endorsements. Terrified of disappointing his family. Terrified of ruining everything he had worked his entire life for. And I understood that. I really did. That understanding broke my heart. Because sometimes love isn't enough. And sometimes staying means losing yourself. So I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I packed quietly. No dramatic music. No slammed doors. Just folded clothes and memories that suddenly felt heavier than they should have. I didn't leave a long note. I didn't explain myself again. I left space. The airport was loud and bright and full of people going somewhere else. I told myself not to look for him. I told myself this was necessary. I told myself I was strong enough to walk away. Then I heard my name. Not shouted, not announced. Spoken softly, the way only one person ever said it. I turned. Ethan stood there, breathless, hair uncombed, eyes filled with panic and relief at the same time. He said he couldn't let me leave like that. He said the thought of a future without me felt empty. But even as he spoke, I could see it. The fear was still there. And love built on fear doesn't survive. We stood there, surrounded by movement, frozen in our own moment. No promises. No clear answers. Just two people realizing that loving each other wasn't the hardest part. Choosing it was. The internet didn't whisper the truth. It screamed it. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. Notifications stacking on top of each other so fast I couldn't read them. Missed calls. Messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Even my email flooded. At first, I thought something had happened to Ethan. Then I saw the headline. Not one headline. Hundreds. My stomach dropped. Someone had leaked the contract. Not just parts of it. Everything. My name. My signature. The clauses. The dates. Proof that the relationship everyone had fallen in love with was never real. I sat there frozen, staring at my screen as if it might change. It didn't. The comments were worse. People called me a liar, a gold digger, a nobody chasing fame, a woman who knew her place and still wanted more. They didn't care that it started as business. They didn't care that feelings had changed. They just needed someone to blame. And I was convenient. Ethan didn't call right away. When he finally did, his voice sounded distant, like he was speaking through layers of chaos I couldn't see. His team had gone into lockdown mode. PR statements. Emergency meetings. Lawyers arguing over damage control. They told him to stay quiet. They told him to distance himself. They told him the worst thing he could do right now was choose me. That hurt more than the headlines. For the first time, I saw what I truly meant in his world. Not a partner. Not a priority. A problem to be managed. I turned off my phone. Not because I was weak, but because I was done being available to people who only wanted silence from me. Hours later, there was a knock on my door. I didn't have to open it to know who it was. Ethan stood there when I finally did. No cameras. No agent. No rehearsed statements. Just him. And guilt written all over his face. He said he never wanted it to come out like this. He said he was trying to protect both of us. I asked him a simple question. Who leaked it? He hesitated. That was my answer. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone close. Someone who believed sacrificing me was worth saving his future. I asked him if he had tried to stop it. He said yes. But his eyes said not hard enough. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized I had been standing at the edge of his life, hoping one day he'd pull me in. Instead, when things got hard, he stepped back and let me fall. I told him I wasn't angry. That surprised him. I told him I was disappointed. That broke him. He tried to explain. Tried to say the draft was everything. Tried to say one mistake could cost him his career. Tried to say he loved me, but didn't know how to fight the world and still win. I told him something I'd never planned to say. If loving me ruins your image, then you never really chose me. Silence filled the room. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that ends things. He left without arguing. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to apologize. And I wasn't going to let the story be told without my voice. I wrote my own statement. Not defensive. Not emotional. Just honest. I explained how it began. Why I agreed. How it changed. And how easy it was for people to forget there was a real person behind the narrative. I posted it. Then I closed my laptop. The reaction was explosive. Some people still hated me, but others listened. Women who recognized themselves in my words. People tired of seeing someone blamed for someone else's ambition. Strangers who finally saw the human cost behind fame. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. The draft happened days later. Ethan was selected. Cameras flashed. Crowds cheered. His smile looked practiced. But when our eyes met across the room, I saw it. Regret. Not because of the scandal. Because he knew. He had won everything, and lost the one person who never treated him like a brand. And as I walked away from that world for good, I understood something clearly. Some truths cost you everything, but they give you yourself back. The world moved on faster than I expected. The headlines disappeared. New scandals replaced old ones. Another star rose. Another story ended. But healing doesn't follow trends. It happens quietly. I left the city. Not dramatically. Just far enough to breathe again. I took a job that didn't care about my name or my past. No cameras. No expectations. Just work that ended at a reasonable hour, and nights that belonged to me again. For the first time in months, I slept without my phone beside me. I stopped checking comments. I stopped replaying conversations. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Peace didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. In mornings where I didn't feel anxious. In laughter that surprised me. In moments where I realized I hadn't thought about him all day. Until one afternoon, I did. Not because of the news. Because he was standing in front of me. No cameras. No crowd. Just Ethan. He looked different. Not broken. Just honest. He didn't start with excuses. He didn't talk about the league or the pressure or the past. He apologized. Not for the scandal. For the choice. He told me success felt louder than ever and emptier than he imagined. He told me he finally understood that protecting an image at the cost of a person wasn't strength. It was fear. And fear had cost him us. I listened. Not because I owed him anything, but because I had loved him once. He asked me if there was still a chance. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I told him the truth. I told him love wasn't something I could perform again. That I wouldn't be hidden. That I wouldn't compete with a brand. That if he chose me this time, it had to be loudly, clearly, and without conditions. He nodded, and for the first time, he didn't ask me to wait. He said, then choose yourself. Even if that means walking away from me. That was how I knew he had finally grown. And that was how I knew my answer. I smiled. I thanked him. And I let him go. Not with anger, but with peace. Some love stories don't end with people together. They end with people becoming who they were meant to be. Months later, I started writing. Not for attention. Not for closure. But because my voice mattered. And somewhere out there, someone needed to hear it. I stopped being the girl chosen to fix someone's image. I became the woman who chose herself. And that choice changed everything. Healing didn't look the way people imagined. There was no dramatic comeback. No sudden glow-up. No moment where everything felt fixed. There was just silence. After the world moved on, I stayed behind with the mess it left in me. People still recognize my face sometimes. Not enough to be famous. Just enough to be uncomfortable. A second glance. A pause. A whisper. Opportunities disappeared quietly. Jobs that had sounded excited before suddenly went in another direction. Invitations stopped coming. I learned how reputation lingers even when the truth is public. But something else happened too. Messages started arriving. From women. From strangers. From people who saw themselves in my story. They told me about loving someone who never fully chose them. About shrinking themselves to make someone else shine brighter. About realizing too late that they were an accessory, not a priority. Those messages mattered more than any apology. I stopped trying to rebuild the old version of my life. Instead, I built a quieter one. I moved slower. I listened more. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. And somewhere between healing and solitude, I found strength again. Not loud strength. Real strength. Success didn't save Ethan. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Sold-out stadiums. Bigger contracts. Smiling interviews. But success has a way of amplifying what's missing. He tried dating again. People wanted him, the version they saw on TV. The status. The lifestyle. No one wanted quiet parts. No one wanted the fear. No one wanted the man who struggled to sleep because he kept replaying the same choice over and over. He told himself he had done what he had to do. that sacrificing one relationship was worth securing a lifetime. But the nights were long, and regret is loud when there's nothing else to distract you. He watched from a distance as I slowly rebuilt myself, not chasing attention, not begging for validation, just becoming solid. And for the first time, he understood something he hadn't before. Love isn't proven by words. It's proven by what you're willing to lose. We didn't plan to see each other again. Life just has a strange sense of timing. We cross paths in most ordinary way. No cameras, no headlines, just two people in the same space, carrying different versions of the same past. We talked, not about what could have been, about what was. He apologized again, but this time without desperation, without expectation. I forgave him not to free him, but to free myself. We acknowledged the truth. We loved each other in the only way we knew how at the time, and it still wasn't enough. There was no dramatic goodbye, just understanding. And sometimes that's the most honest ending you can get. I didn't tell my story to reclaim the past. I told it to release it. I wrote anonymously at first, not to hide but to protect the message from the noise. The response was overwhelming. People didn't see a scandal. They saw themselves. They saw the cost of loving someone who only loved the version of you that didn't inconvenience them. I stopped being the fake girlfriend. I became the woman who survived loving someone in the spotlight and chose herself anyway. And now, before the story ends, I want to speak directly to you. If you've watched this story to the very end, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for choosing stories with depth instead of noise. This is Prime Tale, where stories aren't rushed, emotions are real, and every ending means something. If this story touched you, helped you, or reminded you of your own worth, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. More original stories are coming. And until then, never shrink yourself to make someone else look bigger. Choose real. Choose yourself. And thank you for being here.